And now we're going to look at The Empire Strikes Back, Part 2. And in this video, we're going to look at how the actions of Hitler and the inactions of the rest of the world sparks the war. To understand how Adolf Hitler sparked World War II, we need to look at geopolitics and some of the underlying motivation of the expansionist policies of the Nazi Party. Now, as the name would imply, geopolitics combines the study of politics within the context of geography. In the late 1800s, Friedrich Ratzel, a German who obviously predated World War I and the Nazi movement, proposed an organic theory. This concept promoted the idea that the state resembled a biological organism, going through the stages of birth, maturity, decline, and death. Nourishment would come through the acquisition of less powerful territories. In Hitler's book Mein Kampf, he detailed his belief that the German people needed Lebensraum, or living space, for example, more land and raw materials. And this land should be found in the East. It was the stated policy of the Nazis to kill, deport, or enslave the Polish, Russians, and other Slavic populations who were deemed to be inferior. This concept aligned very well with social Darwinism. The Nazis believed the Aryans were the master race, so to save humanity, they felt it was their duty to eliminate those with weaker genes and to repopulate the land with Germanic people. Space obviously would be essential, and this led to the expansionist Nazi policies of the 1930s. Through propaganda, guile, and intimidation, the Nazis gained power, and especially after a communist individual was caught starting a fire to the Reichstag, the Nazis accused communists of attempting a revolution. With Hitler already appointed as chancellor, they banned the Communist Party, filled the empty seats with their own party members, making them the majority, and proceeded to suspend most civil liberties in Germany. They also stopped paying back their war debts, helping to stabilize the economy, and spend resources on rebuilding their armed forces. And in January of 1935, a plebiscite was held in the Saar territory after the Nazis designed a campaign to sway the voters. We can see the Saar territory right here. The Saarland had been a protectorate of France and Britain since World War I. The result of the plebiscite was that the overwhelming majority, more than 90%, voted to rejoin Germany. In 1935, the Nazis passed the Nuremberg laws, which were highly anti-Semitic. And they specifically defined someone as mixed if they had one or two Jewish grandparents, as you can see here. And they were designated as Jews if they had 3 or 4 Jewish grandparents, as you can see over here. The law for the protection of German blood and German honor forbade intermarriage between Aryans and non-Aryans to keep the German bloodline pure, and the law of the Reich citizen deprived Jews of citizenship, denying them civil liberties and opening the way for their eventual eradication. In March of 1936, Germany invaded the Rhineland, a buffer zone established between Germany and France after World War I. Even though this violated the Versailles Treaty, the League of Nations took no action. And the Summer Olympics of 1936 took place in Berlin. Hitler used these games to showcase what he viewed as German superiority, winning the medal count. It was also the first time the torch relay was introduced. However, Jesse Owens, an African American, won 4 gold medals. In a classic story of sportsmanship, Owens failed on his first 2 attempts in the qualifying round of the long jump. A third miss, and Owens wouldn't make it to the final. Lutz Long, a German and eventual silver medalist, supposedly helped Owens by advising him to jump a foot behind the takeoff board. One version had him even laying a towel in front of the marker. Owens qualified and eventually won the gold medal. While this was likely more myth than fact, it nonetheless makes for a good story. Also in 1936, the Rome-Berlin Axis was formed, an anti-communist defense treaty between Italy and Germany. Mussolini stated that this new axis would be the center around which all other nations would revolve, much like the Earth rotates on its axis. The Anti-Comintern Pact, an anti-communist treaty, was signed between Germany and Japan, of which Italy joined later. Now, the Comintern was an international communist organization formed in Moscow with the purpose of starting revolutions around the world. It was out of this common hatred of communism that the Axis powers formed between Germany, Italy, and Japan. And in 1937, Hitler repudiated the war guilt clause of the Versailles Treaty. By rejecting this hated article and standing up to the rest of Europe, Hitler gained more support of the German people. In 1938, German troops marched into Austria unopposed. This was the Anschluss, or Union, the annexation of Austria into Germany. While many Austrians and Germans were ecstatic about this, many others were terrified. Ever watch The Sound of Music? Nonetheless, once again, the League of Nations took no action, with most nations choosing rather to avoid war at any cost. And then in April, the Sudeten crisis occurred. Much of the mountainous and heavily fortified land around Czechoslovakia was given to the Czechs as a physical barrier between them and Germany. However, much of this territory contained a majority of Germans. Hitler argued they should be granted more autonomy and had the right to self-determination. Meanwhile, the Nazis increased pressure by staging provocations and incidents. The Nazis were masters of propaganda. Led by Joseph Paul Goebbels, one of Hitler's most anti-Semitic and devout followers, the Nazis used written news, radio, and movies to spread their hateful ideology and promote German nationalism. One of Goebbels' most infamous quotes goes as follows: "If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, and/or military consequences of the lie. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent. For the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus by extension, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state." Of course, Americans were not immune to propaganda as well. Dr. Seuss, yes, the Dr. Seuss, was actually a political cartoonist back in World War II. You can see the anti-Goebbels cartoon he designed here. And if you look at this propaganda poster to the right, and you look at the German officer's monocle, you'll see a very eerie image. Reacting to the Sudeten crisis, in September 1938, the Munich Conference was held in Germany. The key leaders were Neville Chamberlain of the UK, Edouard Daladier of France, Adolf Hitler of Germany, and Benito Mussolini of Italy. Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union wasn't invited, especially since the British and French feared the spread of communism more than the spread of fascism. In this cartoon, you can see the leaders of the Munich Conference, with Stalin off to the side saying, "What, no chair for me?" Even the leaders of Czechoslovakia weren't invited, even though it dealt with them specifically, as you can see in the map here in the background. Hitler stated that the Sudetenland would be the last claim he would make in Europe, convincing them that he was merely reclaiming German lands unjustly lost after the Great War. In the end, the British and French allowed Hitler to retain the land. Chamberlain flew back to England, and upon his return, he infamously predicted there would be peace for our time.
This morning, I had another talk with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler. And here is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine. We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again.
Hitler's signature wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. He had no intention to stop expanding and carry on the pursuit of Lebensraum. He merely wanted to buy time and keep his enemies off guard during the winter. So in the spring thaw, the Germans could carry out their planned invasions of more European territories. The appeasement at Munich has been considered to be one of the worst capitulations in modern history. To finish this video, we'll briefly discuss Kristallnacht, a symbol and a sign of things to come. In early November, a Jewish man, upset that his family was being deported, shot and killed a German diplomat. The Nazis used this incident to start a propagandist campaign that would eventually grow into the Holocaust. A pogrom was carried out by the Nazis and non-Jewish citizens. More than 90 Jews were killed in the attacks and more than 30,000 were arrested, with most ending up in concentration camps. Over 1,000 synagogues were burned and over 7,000 Jewish businesses were destroyed or damaged. The name Kristallnacht comes from the shards of broken glass that littered the streets. Hitler and the Nazi Party had already achieved a minor miracle. They had regained virtually all German land taken in the Great War, helped stabilize their economy, initiate the goal of eliminating the Jewish population, and achieved all this with the rest of the world sitting on the sidelines. It would only be a matter of time before Hitler's hunger for more territory would lead the world into a conflict many times greater than the Great War.
I don't want war. All I want is peace. 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 A little piece of Poland. little piece of France, a little piece of Portugal and Austria perchance. A little slice of Turkey and all that entails. And then a piece of England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales. A little nip of Norway, a little spot of Greece, a little hunk of Hungary. Oh, what a lovely feast. A little bite of Belgium, and now for some dessert. Romania, Albania and Russia wouldn't hurt.